Denise Williams here, inviting you to join us on Financially Focused, the ultimate destination for go-getters who are ready to take the step-by-step actions to master your finances and create a family legacy. Tune in, watch, take notes, and participate to discover the strategies of our expert guests who provide invaluable guidance and powerful coaching tools to supercharge your financial journey.
Tune in to Financially Focused, Thursdays at 8:30 p.m. only on PBCJ, the People's Station.
Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Let's Talk Goals. It's a conversation about what you and I can do to help make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families and do business by achieving 17 big goals. And we're talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. Now, countries around the world have agreed to work on the SDGs to make the world a better place by 2030. And the idea is to make sure that everyone, everywhere can live a good life without harming the planet. Now, that without harming the planet part, that's the sustainable part of the sustainable development. But without the planet, because without the planet really, we don't have a home. So the goals are really about keeping that home functioning. So what are we going to be talking about during the course of Let's Talk Goals? We're going to be talking about development planning and Jamaica's own national plan, what's in it, and how we can track what we're doing. It takes cash to care, as we all know, so we're going to be talking about how we fund that plan and development in general. And we'll also discuss how we can work together with other countries to tackle big issues like climate change and teach people new skills and improve education generally. And we'll also look at how having a variety of industries like tourism and manufacturing makes the economy stronger and more resilient. It's all about creating a better future for everyone. And today we start by talking about planning for development. And I want to start by saying something I'm going to be saying throughout the series, that at the end of the day, a national plan is just that. It's a plan for every Jamaican national, as in every person. We live in our homes. We live in our communities. So we have to act. Not someone else's job, it's our job. So to break it down today, my guest is Dr. Wayne Henry. He's Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica. And I wanted to start by talking generally about the two sets of plans we're talking about today, the bigger plan and the national plan. First, we're talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. In simple language, the SDGs are sort of big goals countries around the world have decided to achieve by 2030. Why 2030?
So thank you very much, Archie. Good to be here. They've set timelines globally for development. And so initially they had what we call the Millennium Development Goals, you remember?
Yes.
Where we had 2015 as a target. And it's good to have planning horizons that are long enough to achieve certain outcomes that may take some time in terms of implementation. If a country has in its energy mix in terms of generating energy and they want to move using mostly fossil fuels, which are bad for the planet, and they want to move to more, renewables, it may take some time to build out the capacity. It may take some time to implement in terms of new industries and technologies to facilitate that.
Because that would be like moving from like oil and gas to like solar and wind, etc.
Correct. And also even the human capital development, the training to have persons who are equipped to facilitate and operate these industries may take time also. So in any development horizon, it's good to have a sustainable, we call it a sort of long-term planning horizon to move away from, in Jamaica's case, we had sort of the 5-year cycles, the 5-year development plan, and now we've implemented this now in the middle of the 21, coming up to the end of a 21-year development plan, Vision 2030 Jamaica.
If people think about that in the scope of how you want to plan for your homes, that's also the same, because there are plans, there are things that you're going to want to do, and you can't get up today and decide you want to change your roof entirely and achieve it the next day necessarily.
Excellent analogy. And the truth is, when you speak of sustainability, we can take decisions today that benefit us now, but then jeopardize our long run future. So if we say, let's take the family on a huge vacation, and we do that and we enjoy ourselves this summer, and we say, well, the children have to go off to college in a little while, and we have no money for college, right? So we have to plan, take responsible decisions that anchor what we do today and still enhance the future good of our family, future good of our populations. And so that's when we think of sustainability in terms of taking actions today that benefit us also in the future and don't jeopardize.
In terms of the overall, some of what those goals are, what are some of the goals?
So some of the goals would be that everybody has access to good education and a good quality education. Mm-hmm. So while we have good educational institutions, how many persons have access to that? Are persons jeopardized because of where they were born or their income availability or the country they are in? Good quality education and access for all. We want to have persons having you spoke about the clean planet, access to clean air, clean water. Some people have decent jobs. I will speak of decent work and persons having safe environments to live in. We're thinking of persons having access to those general ability to pursue their goals in a healthy environment, that children are able to realize their greatest potential. And so for the Sustainable Development Goals, we speak of the SDGs, we implement that in Jamaica through our National Development Plan, Vision 2030 Jamaica, the National Development Plan. And we have our plan over 98% aligned to the SDGs, which means if we focus on implementing the Vision 2030 goals and objectives, we would, in fact, to 98% be achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
Now, when you talk about these goals as well, just want to reinforce again that it's the same thing that you'll be doing in your household. A lot of these goals are goals that one would be making for one's family.
Correct. And it's important to set the goals, Archie, because if you say another goal is that we have a healthy environment, people have access to health care, people have access to, clean drinking water, and one person who may have more resources is prohibited from taking actions that jeopardize. So if I'm upstream and I'm running an industry, I don't put effluent and waste in the water, in the river, that downstream people are jeopardized in that way. So we want, it's supposed to be comprehensive, it's supposed to encompass everyone, that each person's actions and activities would generate the good outcomes for us all. And so it's good to coalesce, it's good to have everybody focusing on a set of goals. And some people say, well, what if we're not attaining the goals? It's important to have the goals in mind and to be moving towards attainment. And so the ability to measure where we are, to measure progress, to say, and to report to all of us as stakeholders. So PIOJ would now play that role of reporting to the country. And then as a country now, we are part of that global agenda, some 193 countries of the United Nations, where they report globally on where we are, where each country is, where the gaps are, how far we are behind.
So that would essentially be sort of the core role of the PIOJ, helping us to put the plan together at the national level, but also to pay attention to it.
So correct. So the PIOJ is synonymous with development planning, right? So we've been planning for Jamaica from before independence. PIOJ had its origins in the Central Planning Unit. They call that CPU. That sounds like it does, But that was from 1955, and the PIOJ, the Central Planning Unit at that time, was reporting to what they call the Office of the Premier, and that's pre-independence. And so from a development planning standpoint, we've been integral in all the plans. From our first National Development Plan in 1962 to 1967, a 5-year plan, and we had a series of plans emerging, culminating to now our Vision 2030 Jamaica National Development Plan, which is a 21-year plan. So we've moved from that sort of shorter-term planning cycles, that 5-year plans. They were very important, but moving now towards that almost global best practice of having longer planning horizons, just as we said, to implement and to have these goals that we are moving towards. And it would call in some cases for structural shifts in the country, in the economy. And so it's not just, while we drive that process, it's owned by all of us, right? As you can imagine. So it's going to call for this integrated whole of government approach, and then it's really whole of society. So while the government may lead on policies and initiatives, it will take all of us to buy in and to be engaged to realize the outcomes we all want.
I want to talk a little bit about what some of those outcomes are and what individuals can do in their different sectors, in their different spheres of life. But just to go back to this idea of that this is something we've been doing over time, what are some of the things that people would see sort of generally, or maybe pass on the road, etc., that they might not have taken, might not be aware of the fact that this is actually a result of work we have been doing over time?
So excellent point. If you look at some of the road work, infrastructure development, we say that the balance and the benefit to the country of infrastructure, and we say it facilitates. If you do a road, a highway connection, you say it facilitates better, easier, lower transactions costs of doing business, of engaging, of transporting publics. We tie our and increase accessibility of our two airports. That helps in terms of, so when you do highway construction, people say, well, why would you build a highway when we need to do so many other things? There are a lot of benefits that come from a highway construction.
There was a phrase we used to make when when I remember Highway 2000 came about, or that idea, the road to development is linked to the development of roads.
I like that. So that easily you would see it over time, where businesses flourish. Certain areas of the island, it used to be you have the strong, urban development because of a rural-urban drift. As you build highways, you see more rural development taking places, and other hotspots emerging throughout the island. So people would have an event in Mandeville and have no problem because they can get there more easily. You may have sporting events in Montego Bay, right? And the teams come because they can traverse more easily. Business centers come up, plazas emerge. We're hearing the developments taking place in St. Thomas. All these things are a result of planning and looking in the long term. Where do we place schools? Where do we place hotels? And those kinds of things that come from a general ongoing plan. It's a plan that looks at the demographic, the population of Jamaica, and examine it for shifts. So PIOJ will help to develop a population policy, a national policy on population that says we have a population that is growing older, people are living longer, but it may be the health of the persons may be jeopardized as we are characterized by more non-communicable diseases, what we call lifestyle diseases, yes. Diabetes, hypertension. And you see a Ministry of Health now taking measures to get Jamaica to move and to be more health conscious, and it's all tied in because the plan and the indicators that we show are highlighting these realities. Policies for senior citizens, and the PIOJ would have developed a national senior citizen policy, which has implications on how do we treat with older persons. We've taken the decision to increase the retirement age from 60 to 65. These are things that are coming out of those kinds of assessments, looking at the plans, examining the different areas. It's a national plan, it's an integrated plan because it looks at areas not just on the social and population, increasing social protection through the PATH program and the more vulnerable. How do we treat better with persons with disabilities? All of these tie in. On the social side, you have issues about migration and the brain drain. How do we treat with the labor market, supply and training up the right persons? What are the jobs of the future? How do we anticipate that? And how do we prepare our people from now, including STEM now, not just getting more science again, technology in our education system, more mathematics, and it's all important, but the emphasis as we see gaps emerging, how do we fill those gaps? So that's important on the social. You look at the economic and the plan to reduce our debt because of what that does, the debt burden, and the countries that have high debt burdens as Jamaica had, and we still have a debt to treat with, but we've reduced debt significantly, which has allowed more monies to flow from the private sector to crowd in private sector lending and engagement. We've reduced debt to allow the government to do more things and to increase the social safety net in terms of providing for those who are vulnerable. So these things on the economic side, how do we diversify? You've seen the BPO industry emerge. We see we're trying to do greater processes in agriculture to be more climate smart. How do we treat with climate impacts in Jamaica as we're very vulnerable? That comes on the environment and the economy. So it's what we say integrated planning on those dimensions of what we call dimensions of sustainability: economic, social, and environmental.
So people see all of this happening. They don't necessarily know this is the driving force between all of these different kinds of things. This is how all of this ties together. So talk about the big word for that is perhaps, or phrase for that is perhaps what you call policy coherence.
Excellent. That's an excellent point, because we say it takes all of us. because it's a cross-cutting, because it's so widespread, it will take all of our engagement. Can you imagine if we've done good in terms of economic progress and doing all these things, and we didn't do enough to make Jamaica more climate resilient? And then a hurricane comes and sets us back in a heavy flooding. If we don't do enough to, we have drought periods. What we do to mitigate against that? How do we have irrigation programs? Now we're having some, big, large-scale irrigation programs. Essex Valley, we hear about South Clarendon, South Plains, to build infrastructure to better treat with when we have the drought conditions and drought periods, to treat with agriculture, doing more protected agriculture because we are susceptible to, the vagaries of climate change. And so those are the things that take all of us, and we don't want duplication. We have limited resources like every country in the world. Some may have more than others, but we are all constrained in resources, so we can't afford to waste. How are we most efficient? Is that issue of, just as you've said, Archie, policy coherence, that we in the implementation of and measuring, monitoring Vision 2030 Jamaica, the Planning Institute develops what we call these medium-term socio-economic policy frameworks. It's a big word, we just say MTF for short, the medium-term framework, which are some 3-year sort of planning cycles where we allow, if you are in one industry and you have your business plan to achieve your goals, in another, we are all asked to make sure they align to this medium-term framework, right, which feeds into Vision 2030, so that what you are accomplishing and what I'm accomplishing, even though they may be in disparate and different industries, they are all achieving that same purpose, and that's very important for policy coherence. We have, when we speak of stakeholder consultation, a number of stakeholders for this to all work, and we want to have these groupings where we can bring everyone together and hear everyone. So it has to be very representative, what we call multi-stakeholder driven. We have to hear the voice of every person. So we can take decisions where persons with disabilities, or we call it, they are otherwise abled, instead of just saying disabled, they have other abilities. And how do you bring them to the table and have their voices? We can't make decisions, the best decisions for them, unless we hear from them.
Because when you're taking it out now, you're taking it out of the home and talking about planning for community, and Jamaica is really one big community.
Correct.
So who are all of the members of your community, the elderly person, the person who is differently abled, etc., and how do you take those people into consideration? In terms of the 21-year plan now, to go back to the SDGs, how you talk about the monitoring of progress, and it's no secret that globally there's a challenge with some of the SDGs. How have we been doing in terms of, first, what areas have we been making progress in?
So we've been making, and good point, Archie, of the Jamaica vis-a-vis the global stage. We've been doing better than the global average. But that's still not good enough, right? As we know, in Jamaica, we are going for gold in everything. and the truth is, in a matter of development is that process of making persons' standards of living better, improving the standard of living of our citizens, of everyone in the community. How are we better off? That's development. Economic growth is that we can produce more goods and services this year as against next year. There's an increase, and that's what we have grown the economy. An economy is just that the composite, the total of all the goods produced, all the services offered in a country. And that we measure that by gross domestic product. Any increase in gross domestic product is economic growth. And we speak of real GDP because real meaning versus nominal, because if the prices go up, it looks like it has increased, but real means moving out that price effect. You have a real, a tangible increase in the quantum of goods and services produced in a country. That's economic growth. It's good to grow an economy because it should release and facilitate the incomes and resources necessary to go towards enhancing and improving the quality of life of persons. Meaning, economic growth should bring about development. We should be better off, generally speaking. And allowing the resources to develop the country. And so we've improved in many areas. So we've improved in economic growth. We've improved in the area of economy. We have seen debt reduction moving from 148% of GDP, meaning our debt was 148%, right, versus 100% of GDP of what we produce. We had more debt than what we were producing. We've brought that debt number, that debt figure down to just 70%. over just maybe 10 years, and that's huge, right? 10 to 12 years. And that's been celebrated globally to say, well, this can be done, right? And so we've made strides there. We've seen improvements in infant mortality, where the death rate where children who are, the death rate of children as they were being born and in early ages, that has reduced. We've seen recently highlighted the transmission of HIV from mother to child. That's been eradicated in terms of eliminated. We've seen a lot of improvements in these health outcomes in terms of vaccination levels near universal levels for the whole country. And we've eliminated certain things like you saw polio, measles, mumps, things like the MMR, those vaccination programs that have taken hold and helped the population overall. So we are free of those things. That's very huge. And in some countries, they are seeing reversals, where they are seeing issues of polio arising, in countries that you didn't expect. So we've made gains in those areas. In terms of our literacy rates, we've seen improvements. In terms of educational outcomes, certain improvements. So we've done well. Areas that we're struggling in terms of the crime rate and violent crime, the homicide rate, murder, we haven't done as well as we'd want to there. We haven't done as well there. In terms of environmentally, while we have seen better measures of the environment, sometimes the data itself was hard to get, but even when we're seeing the measures coming in and we've improved in sort of some of the data collection, we've seen that on the environment front, we haven't done as well, and we need to do better, even as we're transitioning and trying to improve our energy diversification mix to do more renewables in the country, but we haven't done as well there. We've seen some improvements in poverty, but overall, we think we want to do much better in terms of the poverty head count. So we are seeing improvements in a number of things for us. We had pre-COVID, we had maybe 67% of our indicators, 67% of them showing that we would have met the target or progress towards
by 2030,
meeting.
as in 2/3 of the target.
2/3 of the target.
Yes.
Since COVID, so we've done, most countries have been involved in this, what we call a midterm assessment. This is for the global, all the SDGs, all the countries assessing the fallout of COVID. So all countries have been set back, have experienced some fallout because of COVID. And certainly in our educational outcome, we've seen some fallout. And they speak about learning loss, where because the children weren't in classrooms and had to be online, and not everybody had the same access to online education and the same quality and experience. We've seen that fallout. So we've had that area of learning loss. We've seen some fallout in some areas of economy. Jamaica has done fairly well because of some of the things, the care programs to mitigate some of the economic fallout. But I think nonetheless, broadly, we've had to do some areas of catching up. The economy has caught up. We've heard our Minister of Finance saying, in terms of just the general number of economic growth, recovered since that 10% fallout of GDP. We've recovered economic jobs have picked up at record levels, but we still have some areas to catch up in. And so we think the global focus is on that. Short time to 2030, globally. So while our fallout, we're still looking at, maybe we still report on those numbers in terms of in short order, having done that assessment, completing that midterm assessment. But globally, only 15% of those targets, only 15% are on target of being achieved. That means that's huge. 85% are behind. And so we're looking now globally to see what are those areas or those tools, mechanisms that we can employ to accelerate progress to 2030. And one tool emerging now is technology. How can you infuse technology to accelerate in terms of the learning loss, to catch up in educational learning? How can we accelerate greater technology enhancements in medicine and in the healthcare field? How can we enhance in terms of the general areas of deployment of industries and enhancing industry competitiveness and so. So we're seeing technology as a great accelerator, potentially, and thus overall human capital development, training of people, skills.
Because when we look at planning, we don't want to be thinking of it as a failure because we don't achieve goals, but the fact that as part of the nature of life means that you decide to fix the roof in a particular way, but over time you can change the way and do something else. You can do something that's much more efficient. Excellent. You can do something that makes you save money in a different kind of way, or simply make a different kind of plan. That's a natural part of the cycle of what we want people to understand.
I like that, and that's a good point, Archie. The truth is, there are many changing realities. And part of what the Planning Institute does is we want to employ greater levels of foresighting capabilities, anticipating challenges even before they emerge, positing various futures for the country, and to say, if we see now the trend so far says an aging population, how do we be proactive and put in place measures to treat with that? If as a country we see that there is increasing climate events, that climate change is worsening, right? The impacts of climate, that hurricanes are stronger, rainfall is more intense, drought periods are longer. How do we prepare the country for that? We call it building the climate resilience of the country. So it's these things that you're saying. So it wasn't that, we always had hurricanes, we always had earthquakes, but the challenge is that they are intensifying and they are more frequent. And so if you have one event, and somebody was just saying as they get ready to launch, speaking of disaster preparedness, and they say it only takes one, right? You say we have 17 events forecast. You say, most of those don't hit Jamaica. It only takes one. So you have to prepare the country to say, what is your emergency response? What's your disaster plan for the country? And the Prime Minister sits atop the National Disaster Committee, which has, again, for policy coherence, all these areas, the Fire Brigade, the JDF, Planning Institute, Social Development Commission, all these here, ODPEM, and pulling together and moving seamlessly to ensure we have a response in place that's appropriate for what you anticipate.
No, that response, not just on that front, but on all fronts, has to involve everyone. So I want to take the conversation there about what individuals can do from their different sectors. So if you work in government now, how do you contribute to this? How do you help plan at a sort of a national level or in your particular sector, in your job?
Excellent point. And so it takes all of us. The medium-term framework that I spoke of, so our 21-year Vision 2030 National Development Plan, through which we implement the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, we say those are being monitored and implemented through these 3-year medium-term frameworks. If you are in an industry, if you are in the Ministry of Industry, Investment, Commerce, I'm in the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries and Mining, we say, how do I have my plans for agriculture, fisheries, and mining, and they call it my corporate plans for the ministry, and these business plans. How do we operate to achieve the goals for industry of agriculture, fisheries, and mining? You have a similar set of plans, goals that you set to achieve in investment, industry, commerce, objectives for the country. The medium-term framework, as it's being created, it's very consultative. So we come and say, these are the national goals for the country. And then each goal speaks to each sector. How are your plans tied into these national goals? And we ensure that what we call that alignment and that policy coherence, so that you are comfortable. After that exercise, I'm comfortable at the PIOJ. The cabinet is comfortable. The parliament is comfortable that as you are pursuing your goals in the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, and I'm pursuing my goals in agriculture, fisheries and mining, they are contributing to national goals being achieved. And that's a very good point. So that exercise is very important. So that's done through what we call thematic working groups and the various themes. So the theme, we include the youth. We may have the private sector as a team, bringing all the leaders together, bringing the youth and youth representatives together to hear their input and their voice. Persons with disabilities are brought together, persons who engage with the climate, in the climate space, all the climate practitioners and stakeholders, and NGOs in the community level are being brought together. And we have these engagements, and they are very important. Our international development partners who come, the World Bank, Caribbean Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, the EU, different ones who come, the bilateral persons who want to lend to the country are engaged. Sometimes it's grants, not lending, but just grant assistance.
So you want people to show up, get very engaged in these conversations. Also look for the opportunities for partnerships. In your house, you want to know what your mother is doing, what your father is doing, so that you can say, okay, I can contribute to this plan in this particular kind of way.
Excellent. I like your analogy, though. And we want to ensure that if we have a certain household budget, mommy is focusing on one thing, and daddy is not focusing on the same thing.
On the vacation.
And leaving out something else that's important. But they want to know that if mommy is focusing on something for the family, daddy is focusing on something else. As they come together, it's all helping the family. But if daddy and mommy are not communicating and they're doing the same thing and they jeopardize another area of the family, right? And they say, but I thought you were working on that. No. So that's why coherence is so important. That's why the thematic groups that bring together and find alignment in this overall set of goals that, importantly, Vision 2030 came out of these national consultations right across school, children, right? Getting the voice of women in terms of the gender balance, because sometimes men may think one way and things are done to benefit, and then the women who contribute so much. And even some research that shows that if you give lending to a small business owned by a female, it does better than a small business owned by a man. And people say, that's what the evidence says, right? When you look at poverty alleviation, they say small groups and these cooperatives that come together. When the women have these groups, they tend to provide for the family better because they're naturally thinking about the family. Well, men are, we're going to make more money. Not saying that, so I'm sure some men are going to be upset. We think about family too. Family is very important. But the evidence shows that $1 lent to a small business or a cooperative where that is women owned and centered tends to be much more successful at reducing poverty in the spaces they operate as does for men. So the gender imperative is important.
You want to take all of these different kind of factors into consideration. In terms of the consultations, that's what people can do, whatever sector they're in, from like the government development agencies, international development partners as well in terms of support. But finally, I just want to close by asking, what can the individual do? I'm at home, I'm hearing about all of this. How should I get involved? What do I do with the information?
Excellent point. So one is to inform yourself. And we are a lot of persons now are on social media. People, so if you're not driven to investigate, because sometimes you have to go on a website. So the information is all there, but we're trying to make it more accessible. So one is that you inform yourself to say what is important. If somebody draws a connection that when I throw my garbage out the window when I'm driving, it's not just why I don't look good, it says it does impact the environment. When people say I'm going to dump my garbage in the gully, you say, that's not my problem. I get rid of the garbage. My house, all right, it smells clean. But it's creating a social problem. And so we have private matters, and I'm an economist by training. So we have private matters, and then you have social matters. The individual can take a decision that benefits the individual, but then costs the collective. And when the garbage piles up, you say, that's in the river, that's not my problem. You throw it in the gully, that's not my problem, until it goes down to Kingston Harbour. Yes. And then the harbour is polluted. Some people say, we can't swim here because it's polluted, but we used to go to the river. Some tourists say, well, we like when we visit this particular river because it's not just beach, the river itself, but no, we can't swim there now. When the fish are dying in the river, the fisher folks say, well, this was our livelihood, so now unemployment goes up. And so many things. And just because I solved my problem, I thought, by throwing the garbage in the gully. So it's the individual, everybody takes decisions and has a role to play to take responsible action. And so one is to be inform yourself of what's going on. And then two, you say, and an easy way is to say be law abiding, because we have laws that try to steer, right, yes, and to set parameters for healthy and good citizenship. If we just follow those laws, don't break the laws, don't be corrupt in any way. Because some people who have much resources can try to flout the system, and that's corruption. And it costs everybody. You say, privately you may think you benefit, because you get away with it, but the truth is it has a social cost, right? You say where resources are allocated efficiently according to various parameters. If you float that to benefit privately, the whole suffers. And so the last point I would want to say, Archie, as you speak about measuring, how do you measure? How do we measure? It's good that we have these goals. It's good that we have these objectives we're going after. How do we measure? We speak of things like results-based management, RBM. You say, what's that? It says that we are looking at evidence-based decision making. So we can say, I'm more comfortable lending $1 to a female-headed cooperative or business because the evidence, the results over time have shown me that you're going to get a better return. We're saying we're not just doing things we feel that may be good. We're saying we're driven by data. We're driven by analyses and assessments and surveys so that we have evidence-based results. And the government is now implementing what we call an integrated results-based management policy. That just as I said, if you are in MIIC, Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, and you have set your goals, while we've ensured that they align to national vision, we want to now periodically check and say, how are you doing against those goals that you've set? And if you're not meeting the targets, why? And that helps now to direct attention and resources. That's what we call the management of the process. If we look at our goals broadly and say we're not doing so well on the environment front, why? It's so we're not measuring it as best we can. Let's do more, invest more into data availability and collection for measurement. We're not doing so well as we look at certain types of NCDs, non-communicable diseases. We say, why? People are living longer, they have access better. Why they not doing? Well, we're not exercising. So as much money as you have, if you don't take care of your body. So we begin to see these gaps emerging, and we can now draw attention to try to close those gaps to realize better development outcomes.
And
so
also make the connection to what we can do as individuals. Was a national goal, excuse me, what it means for my community and what it means for the kind of action that I as an individual should be taking as well. Thank you very much, Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, Dr. Wayne Henry, for setting the stage for the first episode of this series, Let's Talk Goals, all about what we can do in our homes, in our communities, and nationally as well, just to move Jamaica forward. I am Archibald Gordon. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time.